The Packers sent shockwaves through the NFL draft when they used their second third-round pick on Tyron Hopper, a linebacker from Missouri. So who is he, and how does he fit with the Green Bay Packers? Joey Van Zummeren, who covers Missouri football and has been covering the Packers for a long time, he joins us on today's show.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet. And the show for fans who know what happened, they want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. When I was trying to figure out who I wanted to talk to about Tyron Hopper, one of the more surprising picks in the first 100 selections of the NFL draft for anyone, not just the Green Bay Packers, this was a no-brainer. I reached out to one person, and one person only, and luckily, he said yes. You may remember him from Underage Packers. He is now, and you may not believe this, a college student at the University of Missouri, covering University of Missouri football. Joey Van Zummeren, who is now covering football at University of Missouri, but also Bill Huber over at SI Packers. Let him do some work covering the Packers. We know he's been talking about the Packers on his podcast when Underage Packers was a thing for a long time now. Like 7 years, I think, was the time before they stopped doing it. So he is the perfect person to talk about Tyron Hopper. So here we go. Let's talk to him. One of the biggest surprises of the 2024 Green Bay Packers draft came in the third round after the Packers selected Edgerrin Cooper. They double dip at linebacker. They grab Missouri linebacker Tyron Hopper. And I thought the perfect person to tell us a little bit more about that would be our pal, formerly of Underage Packers, now at Mizzou, covering the football team. And of course, still very much involved in covering the Green Bay Packers, including at the draft, Joey Van Zummeren. Joey, this is great to be with you. I won't hold it against you that you once made fun of me in a video that went viral. But it's good to have you, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Peter. And I appreciate your forgiveness, and also Bill Huber's, because he was also somebody I made fun of in that video, and he decided to give me an internship 3 years later. So I appreciate both of your forgiveness on that.
You know, must be a Locked On Packers thing, because Bill was the original host for 1 year of Locked On Packers, and I took over his show. So maybe that has to do with it.
Sure.
I guess the moral of that story is make fun of people, and maybe they'll be nice to you later. I don't know. That'd be an interesting lesson to learn. When you, before the Packers part of this, when did Hopper as a player get on your radar?
Sure. So I just finished my freshman year at Missouri, and so I didn't know I'd be covering Mizzou football until maybe 10 days before their season opener against South Dakota State. But I took on the backup quarterback mentality of not knowing what beat I'd get it signed. I knew I wanted to write for the student newspaper there, but not knowing what beat I wanted, I was preparing for the highest stage for the football season. So I did last summer go back and watch Mizzou's entire football season from 2022. And Hopper was definitely one of the defensive players that stuck out to me. And really the defense's performance as a whole for Mizzou in 2022 is kind of what got the hype train going for them going into the 2023 season.
Yeah, sure.
Because there's a lot of noise building up around them, even after having a 6-win season in 2022. And the defense was a big part of that. I believe they were a top 20 unit in college football in a lot of stats areas. And Hopper was definitely one of those players that took out, along with Darius Robinson, who was a first-round draft pick, the two cornerbacks, and a Straw, and Chris Sabin-Strain, who both got drafted this year. And Hopper really was just kind of almost the straw that made that stirred the drink from the Mizzou defense. Really, even though he didn't play Mike, played Will in 2022 for the most part. Big playmaker. Obviously, had that one interception that a lot of people shared. But really held a lot of things together, kind of like a Band-Aid in some senses. Not that the group was bad, like I was saying, but just kind of covered up a lot of holes. The unfortunate thing was, having him being drafted by the Packers, his 2023 season, as many people have pointed out, was not as spectacular as his 2022 season. And I mostly attribute that to the fact that Mizzou's other starting inside linebacker, Chad Bailey, was dealing with an injury throughout the whole 2023 season. And so Bailey was used sparingly through the first 6 weeks until the LSU game in the middle of the season. And then after that was completely shut down for the rest of the season and had surgery. So even when Bailey was playing, and then especially after Bailey was out, Hopper was kind of used out of position, I guess you could say, and was not used as much in the role that he did his best at in 2022, and kind of just that specialty. I mean, obviously he can do pass coverage as well, but he's a great blitzer and great in short, run game situation as well.
Yeah.
And so with Bailey out for the season, they were kind of using Hopper all over the place, asked him to play Mike a few times, and that was not his best position. And so I think the 2022 film is definitely what Packers fans are going to want to look at as far as where Hopper is at his best and where I expect he'll be used in Hafley's defense this year.
Well, and that makes this really interesting to me, Joey, because I look at Edgerrin Cooper and Tyron Hopper, and they both seem like guys who are better suited to be will linebackers. And to me, that leaves Quay Walker out in the rain a little bit, because I think that's his best position too. Right. And so I do wonder, like, is this just Jeff Hafley going, you know what I want to do? I just want to attack opposing quarterbacks just like crazy and let it all shake out the way that it's going to shake out, because it seems like all of those guys are best coming downhill. But there is some coverage instincts that I saw out there from Hopper that I like, some playmaking instincts where you go, okay, it's not always perfect, but he seems to find the football with regularity.
Right, definitely. Yeah, he does have some moments in pass coverage, especially from the Georgia game from this past year, where you look at, and especially off the line, sometimes he just gets confused. If he's put in man against a tight end, he just right off the line has no idea what is going on. And I think that in part is due to his over aggressiveness that you sometimes see on the run plays, especially where he just completely whiffs on some angles. And that happens sometimes in pass coverage too. But then also, like you mentioned, he had that interception against La Tech last year, I believe, where it's great instincts he's showing. Obviously, his horizontal speed helps him out a lot in that, and that's where his main athleticism comes in. He almost reminds me with that, like, of Spider-Man, with just his movement. I don't know how to explain it, but just like the fluidity of his movement in that. And so I do think it will be interesting, what you were talking about with Quay and also Cooper, just where they drafted both Cooper and Hopper, and specifically Hopper. I know, like you mentioned at the top, one of the biggest surprises for the Packers draft, selecting him in round 3. I mean, to give you some perspective on how shocking that was, even to me, who covered Mizzou football all year. We at the Mizzou side, I write for Mizzou Central over on Fan Nation. We had draft profiles prepared for every player that we thought was going to get drafted. And so we wanted to have those, for Darius Robinson, we had one done on Thursday. Right. For Friday, we had Ennis, Javon Foster, and Chris Sabin-Strain. We did not have one prepared for Tyron Hopper. And so it was a whirlwind there. And I knew that Hopper was on the Packers' radar. Goodikins was at the pro day. Hopper was on a visit with Packers. I did not expect him to go in round 3. And I know a lot of people, because of that, drew comparisons to Oren Burks, because it's like, okay, 3rd round SEC guy, can do some special things, but at his floor is special teams player, which I do think played a little bit of the fact that Packers drafted him. But yeah, really interesting. I do
Which,
think,
by the way, is fine in the third round. I know people get
right.
mad about that, but like if you get his core special teamer in the third round, that's like fine.
Yeah, especially because when I was looking at it afterwards, like, in the first four picks they had before Hopper, they really checked off the boxes they needed to
Right.
in this draft. And then after that, you look at all the other selections, and not that you can just throw those picks away, but they're more so the guys that Halfley has on his Christmas wish list, the luxuries, if you will. And I definitely think Hopper is that kind of player, but also, like you said, can do stuff in pass coverage as well.
More with Joey in just a second here on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Game Time is the place to find last minute tickets because they have tickets up to an hour after any event you want to go to. Save up to 60% buying last minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And with all-in pricing, you can toggle this feature to show the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Plus, seat views. You can get a total panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. And with the lowest price guarantee, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find less expensive tickets in the same section and row for less. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed. More with Joey in just a second, but are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, if someone wants to go, on YouTube, they have all these videos now. Mm-hmm. If they want, like if it's the Alabama game for Edgerrin Cooper, proof of concept, this guy can do it. It's the UCLA game for Jordan Morgan. Okay, this guy can play left tackle. Is there a game like that for you that stands out where you go, when I watch this game, even if it's 2022, you go, okay, this is an NFL linebacker right here.
Right. I would say the one that comes to my mind first is the Kansas State game this past year. Not from 2022. In 2022, Mizzou got beat 40-12 by Kansas State.
All right, so don't watch that one.
Yeah, but the one from 2023 in Columbia, where Mizzou stuns Kansas State. Hopper not only has some great stuff in pass coverage. There was a play early on in the game on a third down where Hopper had a great pass breakup. And then later on in the game, he has a great run stuff on a third down. So that's a game I would watch if you're looking to see the best of Tyron Hopper.
If there were, okay, Anthony Campanile, certified psycho, we got a chance to see him a little bit early on in OTAs. If he can do what with Hopper can become, someone who can give the Packers good reps. What is, like, give me one or two areas where you go, if he can improve this, that can really take his game to a level where you go, okay, he can be a player. Sure.
I think the one thing, and this is probably teachable, I would assume. I've never tried to coach an inside linebacker, but I just
okay, yeah, we won't ask you to do the exact breakdown of how we're going to do it.
Sure, but I think angles and just becoming more consistent in those. And again, I think that boils down to honing in that speed and not getting tunnel vision on certain plays, especially in the run game. That's where he needs to become more consistent at taking those more consistent angles. And you can see that in Mizzou's game against LSU.
Is it like him overestimating his speed? Like what
not
do you
necessarily,
to? Because I saw it on tape too, where I was just sort of
right.
Like, where exactly is he going?
I think some of it is his vision. And I think maybe I guess
Len Zerline described it as playing through a keyhole where he could only see sort of like this narrow field, and that creates issues.
Right, exactly. Maybe not as much overestimating his speed, but I think more so just not anticipating the cuts a back is going to make
Okay, I see.
in time. And that's, again, that keyhole tunnel vision type thing. And then also the second area, I would just say, I would just more consistency as a blitzer, because again, I think for everything that's on film for him, there's moments where he's great at, and then there's moments where it's like, what was the plan here?
What is your sense? I don't know how much you were actually in the locker rooms getting a chance to talk to these guys, but what is your sense of Tyron Hopper, the guy, the teammate, the leader, those things?
Sure. So we at Mizzou, I don't know how other colleges do it, but we just got the access granted to us. So we got 4 players every Tuesday, and that usually was quarterback Brady Cook, some other guy in offense, and then 2 on defense. I don't recall Tyron being brought in there for much, and then after the game, 2 or 3 players that had a good game. And so we didn't get to talk to Tyron all that much this year. At the combine, though, talked to him a little bit. Just very mature, I would say. Knows his stuff. Just kind of one of those guys that would much rather talk about ball than anything else, which you can appreciate.
Yeah.
And then also, I can't remember anything specifically on people talking about Tyron as a leader or a captain, but I do know that just leadership was something very important to Mizzou this season. And no matter how cliche it might have been for them to need some great leadership to turn the program around, that definitely was a big part. And especially at the combine, the main storyline that I was trying to get as a Mizzou reporter was just what it meant to have 8 players there. That was a school record.
It's huge. Yeah.
And a lot of them mentioned, like a lot of them were asked what was the difference this year, and a lot of them said the leadership, and staying on target, staying focused, and making sure that everybody was on the same page. They kind of mentioned or implied some tension on the team in 2022, and not everybody being on task, not everybody wanting to be there, and that completely changing in 2023 because of the leadership. And I'd imagine Tyron was a big part of that.
I want to pivot here for a second, because I think a lot of the audience, especially the ones that already know you, are familiar with underage, which was a great idea. And I thought you guys, when did you start doing? When you were 15, 16? Like,
14.
Can you just walk us through the germ of that idea, the execution, the decision to start doing it? Like, I want to know, because I think if I were 14 now, I would have tried to do the same thing, but I don't know if I would have been as consistent, as good. Like you guys, I was really impressed.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, it's been a while since I thought of that, but when I do think about it, it is impressive that we pulled that off now looking back. And so we started really talking every week in the 2019 season, me and Big B. And we had met through Instagram. We both had Instagram fan pages. He was Big Packers, and he still runs that page. And then I was Packer People 12. And we just had these Instagram fan pages for the Packers. And so we had met at minicamp in 2017 or 18.
Wow, when we were not even training camp, mini camp.
Yeah, that's deep right there. I was there for a cousin's wedding. And so we were both 11 or 12 years old. Then we met then and connected on Instagram. Big B, I had dropped, Vince Bagel gave me his glove, and I had dropped that in the middle of a scrum and was panicking, and Big B had picked it up for me. So I was internally grateful to him for that. I know I have the Vince Bagel glove around here somewhere. But after that, we had connected on Instagram. We started doing Instagram live streams in 2019 before every game, just like 20 minutes. I think one time we got like 6 concurrent viewers, and we were so excited. And so once we started Underage Packers, we had already kind of built, I was going to say we started somewhat of a following on Twitter by the time we started, but that's not true. We started as Acme Packers Podcast, and we just kind of bonded over not only the Packers, but just this really nerdy, but our love for like Packers media and podcasts and everything. Started that in April of 2020, so right before the draft. And then we had Tom Grossi on in episode 8. That was a big hit. and then eventually changed our name to Underage Packers, just because that was kind of the brand we established ourselves as on Packers Twitter and YouTube, as being these really young kids that love the Packers. So went with that name. And then we were off there, and we really appreciated the kindness of you and then everybody else that wanted to hop on our podcast, because it was a great time. And I think we really just capitalized on realizing the need to have a trademark style or something about your podcast that will get people to tune in. So it was a great time, and we did it for 4 years.
Still more with Joey coming up on Locked On Packers. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today, here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app.
I'm not just saying this because you're here. I just like that, hearing you explain it and break it down. It is so smart as high schoolers, that you understood what was required, that you did it. And you're so right about that. And what I think is really cool is now you're at Mizzou, which is one of the preeminent journalism schools in the country. You're doing it. It wasn't just a lark. It was like this window for you. Did you know when you started it, like, hey, this is what I want to do? Or were you just like, hey, I want to talk to my friend about Packers?
I think
that's the beauty of the job, is you get to do a thing that is really fun, that you love, but it's also a job.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think when I started it, I knew I loved doing video stuff and just like content creation. I have been doing YouTube videos, not on the Packers, since I was 9 years old.
Wow.
I had a YouTube channel, and from when I started that when I was 9 until 14, I was just doing like video games. So I'd play Minecraft, I'd play Madden, and I got up to like 700 subscribers. And so I knew I really enjoyed that. And then when I started high school, I was part of student newspaper and like covering sports through my freshman year. And then, I mean, I guess like the Instagram fan page played a part of it too. And I think just kind of like how cool it is to create a community through that. Because I mean, like even 2 weeks ago, I went to my friend's birthday party at Purdue, and he was somebody else that I met through having a Packers Instagram fan page when I was 12. So like seeing the community you can create through online stuff, and then also just like, I just in general kind of having your opinion and getting to see other people react to it. And then I really knew when I was about 16, 2 years into Underage Packers, and I think really getting to talk to a bunch of people that do it professionally really kind of inspired me to have a passion for it, and was really happy to get all the opportunities I did at Mizzou this year.
Well, Joey, keep working hard, man. I know you will. It's been really cool to see your progress. The last question, it all hinges on this.
Okay.
If Tyron Hopper were a Taylor Swift song.
Okay. Oh man, I am so glad you asked this question, Peter, because I have been thinking, I've been toying around a Mizzou podcast in my mind for this upcoming season. One of the segments I would want to do on that is like a song for every week to describe what situation.
It's harder than you think. I was going to do it last year with Jordan Love, and I did it I got like 2 weeks in, and I was like, this is too much. I can't do this.
I got inspired by this. I'm not sure if you saw, like we did a segment whenever we had somebody on Underage Packers that we knew was a Taylor Swift fan. We would spend like the last 15 minutes of the episode just like connecting Taylor Swift songs to whatever the Packers were going through. And I was inspired by that because I saw a Wattpad post of explaining Aaron Rodgers' career through Taylor Swift songs, and it was
incredible stuff.
A 40-song playlist. Man, this is really difficult for Hopper. I would need some more time to think about it, but off the top of my head, I'm going to go with a deeper cut and say "State of Grace."
Okay.
Off her album Red, and specifically,
I feel like it has to be a deep cut because it's got to be something a little surprising.
Right. So the reason I'm going with this is the chorus or the pre-chorus of this song is "I Never Saw You Coming." It's talking about like a relationship that you just kind of fell into, and then also talks about just kind of like, I mean, the whole thesis of this album really is just kind of like the roller coaster that is falling in love, and the torment of that, and like the uncertainty of that. And I think another song that would go with that with is Treacherous on the same album. And so I think, with Hopper, he is just kind of that a little bit of a roller coaster, but he also can stun you and have you fall in love. And I think Packers fans will have that experience with him if he turns out to live up to his potential.
I love it. Joey, thank you so much. Thanks for being a good sport. And hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Peter.
All right, thanks to Joey for joining the show. Awesome to talk with him. Still more here on Locked On Packers this week. Matt Ryan, our conversation with him from the Super Bowl. We talked about Matt LaFleur. We talked about Kyle Shanahan. We talked about the evolution of offense and a whole lot of other interesting, fun things. So that is coming up for you tomorrow. And then we're back at it. We're back at it as we head toward training camp in late July. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you get podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, your podcast of choice. We do know that there is an issue right now with Amazon and their podcast feed. It is their issue, not ours. So be mad at them, not us. It's not our fault. They're working on it. Our people are talking to their people, but they are trying to fix this. This is an Amazon problem. If you are having a problem, if you are an Amazon Podcasts listener, try one of the other platforms. Go check us out on YouTube. You can also follow us on social media. Instagram, Locked On Packers. TikTok, Locked On Packers. YouTube, Locked On Packers. So you can stay Locked On Packers.